On January 1st, 2026, Zohran Mamdani became the mayor of New York City. But something very unusual happened that day. Something that most people didn't notice. But it reveals everything about who he really is. Most politicians, when they gain power, change their lifestyle immediately. Bigger homes, private security, exclusive neighborhoods. But Mamdani, he did something completely different. And when you see what that decision was, you'll understand why his story is unlike any political leader you've seen before. Today, we're going to step inside his private world, his home, his background, his values, and discover how a man with almost no personal wealth rose to lead America's largest city. This is the story of Zohran Mamdani, and it starts in a quiet apartment in Queens. Let's begin. Before politics, before elections, before power, Zohran Mamdani was shaped by movement. He was born on October 18, 1991, in Kampala, Uganda. His mother, filmmaker Mira Nair, told stories that crossed borders. His father, scholar Mahmoud Mamdani, studied how empires leave scars long after they disappear. At their dinner table, conversations didn't separate art from politics or culture from power. Young Zohran learned early, stories are never neutral. They either reinforce power or challenge it. At age 5, his family moved to Cape Town, South Africa. 2 years later, they crossed continents again, settling in New York City. With each move, a lesson repeated itself. Borders decide destinies. Inequality shapes outcomes. An identity can open doors or close them without warning. In New York, he grew up between the Upper West Side and the Bronx. Privilege and poverty separated by subway stops. This proximity to inequality became the fuel for his political awakening. But understanding systems of power is only the first step. What Mamdani did after college would prove whether his education translated into action. After graduating in 2014, Mamdani didn't chase law school or prestigious fellowships. He went to Queens and became a housing counselor. He earned $47,000 a year, sitting across from families facing foreclosure. Most of them were immigrants and people of color. He watched how laws written far away could dismantle lives up close. Each foreclosure wasn't just lost property. It was lost stability, lost community, lost hope. But Mamdani wasn't just working during the day. At night, he turned to music, writing, and producing hip-hop under the names Young Cardamom and Mr. Cardamom. He even contributed to the soundtrack of Queen of Katwe, a film directed by his mother. For him, music wasn't an escape from politics. It was another language for the same fight. But housing counseling and creative expression could only take him so far. The next chapter would pull him directly into the machinery of political power. Politics entered Mamdani's life quietly in 2015. He volunteered on a New York City council campaign. No spotlights, just long days and door knocking. Organizing rooms with folding chairs, canvassing neighborhoods that rarely saw candidates. This was politics from the ground up. Soon after, he joined the Democratic Socialists of America, committing to a philosophy that prioritized systemic change over small reforms. He became a campaign manager and field organizer. There were defeats. There was financial strain. But each campaign taught him something crucial. Waiting politely for change was a luxury his community couldn't afford. The political establishment didn't expect someone like him to last. A housing counselor with no corporate donors, no family dynasty, no traditional path to power. Their skepticism was constant. But Mamdani learned from losing as much as from winning. Failure became the teacher that prepared him for success. And then came the moment he decided to step forward himself. In late 2019, Zohran Mamdani made a decision that would change everything. He announced his candidacy for the New York State Assembly in District 36, covering parts of Astoria and Long Island City. He had no corporate donors backing him, no political dynasty supporting him, no guarantee that voters would even listen to his message. What he had was lived experience, years of housing counseling, community organizing, and a deep understanding of what working families actually needed. There is something terrifying and exhilarating about putting yourself forward for public judgment, asking strangers to trust you with power based on your character and ideas. Mamdani's campaign wasn't about personal ambition. It was about whether the values he believed in could actually win elections. His message focused on issues that affected daily life, housing justice, public transportation, and dignity for working people. Without corporate funding, he relied on small donations and volunteer energy, proving that grassroots campaigns could compete against better-funded opponents. When the votes were counted, he won. He entered the state assembly as one of its most progressive members. But here's what made his victory even more significant. He won without compromising his core message. Other candidates had softened their positions to attract moderate donors. Mamdani refused, betting that voters wanted authenticity over calculation. The victory validated an approach that establishment politics said could not work. He won re-election in 2022 and again in 2024, this time without opposition, a rare achievement that demonstrated his popularity with constituents. His district came to see him not as a politician, but as a genuine representative of their interests and values. This electoral security gave him freedom to take positions that other legislators might avoid, but state assembly victories were just preparation for a much larger challenge. In 2024, Zohran Mamdani announced something many considered impossible. He was running for mayor of New York City, against opponents with more money, more name recognition, and more establishment support. The city had never elected a mayor from the Democratic Socialists of America. The political establishment considered his candidacy idealistic at best, but Mamdani had spent years proving that conventional wisdom about what was possible could be wrong. His platform spoke directly to daily life. Free public buses, city-owned grocery stores, universal childcare, and a freeze on stabilized rents. Major progressive figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders endorsed his campaign. The combination of bold policy and grassroots support created a formula that had never been tested at the mayoral level. But here's what surprised everyone. Mamdani didn't just compete, he surged through the primary in ways nobody predicted. The underestimated candidate became the frontrunner almost overnight. On November 4th, 2025, Zohran Mamdani was elected mayor of New York City, a victory that sent shockwaves through American politics. The housing counselor who once earned $47,000 a year was now responsible for a city of 8 million people. As of January 1st, 2026, he officially stepped into residence at the mayoral mansion. His salary increased from $142,000 as an assemblyman to approximately $260,000 as mayor. But the public victories tell only part of the story. To truly understand Mamdani, you must step inside the private space where he actually lives. The apartment Zohran Mamdani has called home since 2018 sits in Astoria, Queens. The same modest space he rented as a housing counselor earning $47,000 a year. And here's what's remarkable. He never left. No upgrade during his assembly years. No change of address during the mayoral campaign. No upward leap that political success might have justified. This consistency isn't an accident. It's a deliberate choice. The apartment features dark oak flooring throughout, creating warmth and continuity. The kitchen follows a restrained design. White quartz countertops and appliances that emphasize durability over luxury. Every element serves function rather than display. The rent, approximately $3,000 per month, in a city where politicians often live in homes worth millions. It sits just minutes from the waterfront, near cultural spaces like Socrates Sculpture Park, an environment that blends art and daily life. For Mamdani, living here isn't just convenient, it's philosophically consistent. But this apartment tells only part of his financial story. In an era when political success usually means personal wealth, Zohran Mamdani is a striking exception. Entering 2026, his total net worth is estimated at just $200,000. That makes him one of the poorest mayors in modern New York City history. He owns no real estate in the United States, no stocks, no corporate board positions, no business interests, just a small retirement account, and modest music royalties from his creative years. For most of his political career, his only income was his assembly salary of $142,000 per year. As mayor, that increased to approximately $260,000, still modest by executive standards. But here's the most interesting part. His most valuable asset isn't even in America. Around 2014, he purchased a 4-acre plot of land near Kampala, Uganda for about $80,000. Today, it's valued between $150,000 and $250,000. This land represents family ties and long-term security, not luxury. For Mamdani, money isn't the destination. It's simply a tool to live by his convictions. But his relationship with money goes beyond personal finances. While Mamdani's personal wealth remains modest, his impact on community resources has been significant. Approximately $2.5 million raised through fundraising efforts across New York City. But this money didn't come from wealthy donors writing big checks. It came from ordinary people giving what they could. The fundraising began at food distribution sites in the Bronx. Mamdani stood alongside volunteers serving meals to seniors, immigrants, and families in need. From these moments, about $600,000 was raised for food banks and emergency relief. As housing pressures grew, his network raised roughly $1.2 million through small donations, most under $50. That money funded tenant legal aid and eviction defense. The remaining $700,000 went to long-term initiatives aimed at lowering the cost of living for working families. But here's what made his approach different. The average donation was tiny compared to traditional political fundraising. No corporate obligations, no special access promises, just working people building collective power together. But behind his public service lies a private world he carefully protects. Despite his public prominence, Zohran Mamdani keeps his private world carefully contained. He lives in Astoria with his wife Rama Dweji, an illustrator, animator, and ceramic artist. They met through a dating application and married in early 2025. A thoroughly modern love story. Since he took office, she has stayed intentionally outside the political spotlight, continuing her studio work and creative projects without seeking attention. Those close to them describe a clear balance. One partner immersed in civic responsibility, the other anchored in artistic focus. Mamdani rarely posts about family or turns personal relationships into political symbols. His rare social media glimpses are carefully chosen, just enough to feel human. When time allows, he attends film screenings and art events, often without press coverage. His social circle comes from activist, academic, and artistic communities, not traditional political networks. But every aspect of his life reveals the same principle. Behind the headlines, Zohran Mamdani's daily life follows a rhythm shaped by responsibility, not luxury. Long policy briefings, community meetings, and late nights refining speeches fill his working hours. This is the unglamorous reality of executive leadership, the work that happens when cameras aren't watching. Away from City Hall, his habits remain understated. He closely follows international news and engages with political theory. The same intellectual curiosity that shaped his childhood continues to drive him. His conversations center on ideas rather than gossip, discussions with trusted friends drawn from activist, academic, and artistic communities. Travel over the past year has been limited and purposeful. Official responsibilities and family connections, not leisure. But here's what makes his daily life particularly interesting. He actively resists the isolation that leadership typically brings. Instead of retreating into protected spaces, he maintains connections to community events and grassroots gatherings, often without announcements or press coverage. This accessibility isn't political strategy. It's fundamental to who he is. The demands of leading New York City are relentless. Crises that require immediate attention, stakeholders who demand time, decisions that cannot wait. Managing this pressure while maintaining personal integrity requires constant boundary setting, but Mamdani has built a life designed to withstand it. The modest apartment, the creative partnership, the close social circle, the purposeful routines, all intentional choices that support sustainability over spectacle. He has designed a life that protects the person behind the office. Every chapter of Mamdani's story leads to one essential truth about how he understands leadership, identity, and power. Zohran Mamdani's home life is not separate from his politics. It is the living expression of everything he believes. The modest apartment, the financial simplicity, the protected private world, the community investment. Each element reflects one philosophy. Power should serve people, not separate leaders from them. His life proves you can hold extraordinary responsibility while maintaining ordinary human connections. The trappings of power are choices, not requirements. But here's what changes everything about how we understand his approach. His simplicity is not sacrifice. It is freedom. By refusing to accumulate wealth or separate from community, he avoided the obligations that entangle most political leaders. His modest lifestyle is not limitation. It is liberation. The poverty critics might point to is actually the source of his political independence. Picture Mamdani walking through Astoria today, greeting neighbors who knew him before he was mayor, returning to the same apartment that has been his home through every chapter of his rise. The same dark oak floors, the same $3,000 monthly rent, The same neighborhood of artists, immigrants, and working families. This is what leadership looks like when it refuses to separate from the people it serves. You came to this video curious about how New York's new mayor lives, and you discovered something far more meaningful. A leader whose private world perfectly reflects his public values. A rare consistency that proves integrity is possible, even at the highest levels of power. Mamdani's story reminds us that how we live matters as much as what we say. His journey from childhood across continents to the mayor's office was shaped by movement, identity, and deliberate choice. You explored the Astoria apartment that has remained his home through every stage of his rise. You learned about his $200,000 net worth and the Ugandan land that represents his most valuable asset. You discovered the $2.5 million in community fundraising built on small donations and shared responsibility. And you witnessed the careful boundaries that protect his private world. If Mamdani's story of consistent values inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more explorations of how leaders actually live. Now tell me, what surprised you most about how New York's mayor lives? Drop your answer in the comments below. The next chapter of his journey is being written right now, and it's only just beginning.